down the Chesapeake. A lot of the men continue down to Annapolis and are able to board ships and sail down that way, while some of them are still marching by land. This trek took about 3.5 to 5.5 weeks to arrive here. How do you think they're feeling? That's a pretty long trek.
Very, very hungry.
I'd say. But during this trek, George Washington learned that DeGrasse had control of the waterways, and he was ecstatic. He knew now that he would have a win here and be able to defeat Cornwallis. So by the time the Allies get here, they're 17,000 strong. And we have Cornwallis sitting here, again, not anticipating an attack. But he starts to hear that George Washington has made his way down, and he knows that he does not have control of this waterway. So he's not feeling too great about this. So what he wants to do, cross the river, over to Gloucester, and then head north. But instead, he receives a letter from Henry Clinton saying to stay put, I'm going to send 5,000 troops your way. And so he decides to stay. And so I need 3 volunteers who can read nice and loud for me to come up here. And let's set the scene for how Cornwallis was feeling and how he was preparing this area for the siege. All right, come on up.
In the state of defense, if you cannot relieve me very soon, you must be prepared to hear the word.
Cornwallis. Perfect. Round of applause for our volunteer. Excellent job. I will take that. Thank you. So again, he is saying this place is in a state of defense. If you cannot relieve me soon, prepare to hear the worst. So this is Cornwallis writing to Henry Clinton. Henry Clinton is again sending those 5,000 troops. But if he does not send them here, Cornwallis already knows his fate. He could have escaped, but now those troops are going to start to block him in. So now his time to escape is limited. All right, quote 2.
Now, if the French had been in better readiness, or perhaps had better intelligence, the ships could be shot to pieces.
All right, thank you very much. Again, a round of applause for our volunteer. Thank you very much. So Cornwallis knows that the French are just down the waterway here, and he no longer has control of this. He's somewhat blocked in. And so if the French knew that Cornwallis left a lot of his equipment out on the waterways, they could have bombed those ships and he would not have that equipment. But fortunately, the French did not know that. Again, Cornwallis was just preparing this for a naval base, not the siege. All right, the next one.
The ships were set on fire and illuminated the area so brightly that we could easily detect the French ships at anchor in the very night sky.
Thank you very much, and a round of applause. Thank you very much, appreciate it. And so now Cornwallis is setting ships on fire, sending them down the York River, hoping they will collide into that French fleet. The French see this coming and they're able to cut anchor, and it does not impact them. In addition to this, Cornwallis sunk about 24 merchant ships in front of the beach area here in front of Yorktown. So he's creating some type of obstacle. So if the French sail down, there is some type of barrier so they cannot just dock onto land. And what I think is really interesting about this is that at least 9 ships have been identified by underwater archaeologists out in that waterway that are still there today. One of them, called the Betsy, has been completely excavated by archaeologists in the 80s. And so they were able to learn more about Cornwallis's desperate attempt to fortify this area, as well as the construction of ships during that time. So again, you have Cornwallis taking different attempts to fortify this area, preparing for that siege. He knows that George Washington is making his way down, and he only has 8,300 men here. He is low on supplies, any type of ammunition, ammo, as well as food. So things are not going too well for him. So what I would like to do now is walk to the break in the British siege line and look at the site that Cornwallis saw, the construction of that first siege line that he was not anticipating on the morning of October 7th. So let's walk out to the battlefield and know what's going on. So on October 7th, Cornwallis looks out into this field and he sees the construction of that first siege line. So if you look over to my left-hand side here, out by that tree line, see that white flag? That is the first siege line. The second siege line, if you look straight out in front of me, we have that white flag there, see it? Yep. And then over here to my left, there's a navy blue flag with 13 stars. It's very difficult to see unless it's waving in the wind. That is George Washington's flag, and that is the second siege line. Then over to my right here, that white flag, that is Redoubt 9, and behind this tree line is Redoubt 10. So just look how close that is. So we have the British line right here. We're behind that British fortification, and then those readouts again, are British redoubts that the Americans are going to conquer. So let's head over into the shade to that field and see the construction of that first siege line. He did not know how close the Allies were. And so on the night of October 6th, the Allies were already in Yorktown. They marched from Williamsburg down to Yorktown, and they started to construct that siege line. And so they were able to get here undetected because it was raining all that week. And that night that they were digging, the sound of the shovels was muted by the rain. And so the British did not know how close they were. So can you anticipate the expression on these men's faces when they saw that siege line was already constructed within that one night? Probably not feeling too great about that. What I'd like to point out too, that these are just not mounds of dirt. They have different elements that help stabilize the structure. So they have gabions in them. So it's somewhat of a barrel type shape, and it's constructed with twigs. And so they create this barrel, they would fill it with dirt, and again, to help stabilize it, bundles of twigs would be placed on top, and then the dirt would cover that as well. So again, not just the dirt itself, but I still feel like I would not want dirt protecting me from this cannon fire. So the first cannon shots are fired by the French on October 9th, around 3 p.m. And they are fired on the far left side. At 5 p.m., 2 hours later, on the far right-hand side, George Washington fires off the first cannon shots. So there's cannon exchange, and now the Allies want to gain more land. So they construct that second siege line that I point out, the one with the white flag and Washington's Navy flag with the 13 stars. They start to construct that, but they want to conquer 2 redoubts to construct that next line. So they have a plan to take over Redoubts 9 and Redoubts 10. So Redoubt 10 has about 70 British in it, and Redoubt 9 has about 120 British. And so the Americans and the French both have 400 men storm these redoubts. The Americans storm Redoubt 10, and they go in with unloaded muskets, and this is the only hand-to-hand combat. They did not want to signal off any type of signal fire to know that they were coming, and they did not want to accidentally shoot their own. They were able to conquer this redoubt within only 10 minutes. And Alexander Hamilton was the man in charge of this. I would also like to point out Alexander Hamilton is on your $10 bill. So the French are storming Redoubt 9. They do go in with loaded muskets, and it takes them about 30 minutes to accomplish this. But now that they have the 2 redoubts, they're able to construct that second siege line. And Cornwallis and his men are not doing well. Again, lack of supplies, lack of food, lack of ammo. And Cornwallis, those troops that Clinton was supposed to send over, they're not coming. By the time they'd get here, it'd be too late. So Cornwallis wants to cross the York River over to Gloucester and escape. But weather plays a factor, and he's not able to do that. So now we see a drummer boy as well as an officer walk to the top of the earthen fort. That drummer boy is playing a tune while that officer is waving a white flag. Cornwallis has surrendered. On October 17th, the next day, 4 officers meet to determine the Articles of Capitulation or Surrender Agreement. Part of this agreement is saying that the British troops will not be given the honors of war. So we spoke about that earlier, right? The honors of war. And they were denied that in Charleston, South Carolina. So now the men have to walk down from Yorktown, down to Surrender Field with their regimental flags cased, and they have to play a British tune. And the common soldier will be taken prisoner of war, while officers could be paroled. So George Washington and his troops do make their way back north, while the French decide to encamp in Yorktown. George Washington orders that these earthen forts be knocked down on the Allied side because he does not want the same thing to happen to the French. So it is in 1781, the siege that occurred here in Yorktown, that was the last major battle of the Revolutionary War. And I asked you earlier about what the Declaration of Independence means to you and what you think of when you hear the Declaration itself. I hope next time, whenever you think of the Declaration or when you celebrate July 4th, you also remember 1781, the last major battle that occurred here in Yorktown, as well as 1783, when the Treaty of Paris was signed that truly gave us our independence from Great Britain. So I'm happy to answer any of your questions, but thank you for joining me today and bearing in the heat.